Welcome back to a bit Gamey, and the third of these Mars WSS videos, War of Spanish Succession. I'm yet to be convinced that these small table war games can be fun on their own, but in particular I think they need some kind of campaign setting, at least for me. You know, it's just a single battle doesn't really do it. But if you kind of put them together into a campaign setting, then maybe it'll be different. So anyway, the War of Spanish Succession. You got 4 main kind of theatres in Europe. There's other stuff elsewhere as well, but that's beyond my whatever at the moment. So you got 4 bits. You got Spain. You had say Portugal and Catalonia. Oh, sorry, let's start again. Yeah, it starts off with this Spain. It starts off with this Habsburg guy dying without issue, and so you got the Habsburgs versus the Bourbons trying to take control of Spain, and all the other places trying to stop them. They don't want both France and Spain on the same team, or Austria and Spain on the same team, because it's a balance of power. So the size in Spain, you got Portugal and Catalonia, plus various others, versus the ones who are pro-Bourbon. But the thing, at least as far as I can tell, is this was a kind of secondary area really, because one of the interesting things they talk about when they're talking about the battles in Spain or this period is how the armies had got bigger since the Puck and Shot period, but the ability to feed them hadn't got much better. So basically, I don't know if this is 100% true, but this is what I read. So you needed to attack along major rivers basically, so that you can supply your troops through by the river, and that didn't really work in Spain. So, for example, at one point, the Allied forces advanced into and took Madrid, but they couldn't supply the army, so they just retreated again. Britain could supply troops by the sea around the edges, but there wasn't these big rivers like up near the Rhine and the Danube. So it's so eventually the Bourbons won in the end, but it was secondary, so it didn't affect the main decision. So the guy in the end, it was a Bourbon in Spain, but he signed a deal that they'd be separate from the French royal family. So that was that. So leaving that aside, then it might make a good campaign on its own if you knew the details, but I'm forgetting about it for now. And also, one of the biggest effects of the war as a whole, in my opinion, is Britain getting hold of Gibraltar, which not critical for this war, but pretty critical for the next 250 years. Be able to block up the Mediterranean, quite a big deal. So similarly, there's another section was Northern Italy. We had various bits of Northern Italy owned by various people. Savoy is mentioned there as being opposed to the Bourbons, but they were on the side of the French at the beginning, and they switched sides there. But anyway, so France moved a load of troops into Northern Italy to contest various bits owned by Austria. And Prince Eugen, who's the Austrian version of Marlborough in terms of ability, he was fighting with the French in Northern Italy for a long time, or for a while. Again, it doesn't seem like it was a crucial place, because at one point later on, the French withdrew all their troops from Northern Italy because of losses in the Netherlands. So obviously, secondary to the French. So again, that might make a good campaign on its own. Prince Eugen That's it. I don't know how to pronounce that. It might be Eugene or something. Who knows? But anyway, Prince Eugen. They might make an interesting campaign in itself, but again, I think it's secondary. So I mean, this kind of decision was kind of made for me really when I first started getting the Warlord Games figures, because the flags are all from Britain and Holland. So what I'm going to concentrate on is the battle here in the Low Countries, and also at one point the third theatre was France and Bavaria versus Austria, and there was a phase where they doing so well they got to the point where they on the verge of besieging the Austrian capital, and then what's his face, Marlborough marched along the Rhine and they had the Battle of Blenheim, which saved it. So that's going to be the crux. I'm going to look at the battles in the Low Countries, Britain, Holland, Denmark, and places like that, all fighting with the French, and then an excursion down the Rhine for the Blenheim, and then back to the Low Countries again for whatever the last one was, Ramillies or something. So that's what I'm going to look at. It's trying to create a campaign, look at the list of the battles that took place between the Low Countries and a trip to Austria, and look for interesting things you could do on a small table. It's not going to be the whole battle. You're not going to really do the whole battle of Blenheim on a small table, but take little bits from little battles and string them together and make them kind of, some kind of point score out of it to see how well you do. So, for example, on I forget the name of it, I've got them written down. But there was one battle where it was part of a fortified wall along part of the Netherlands, and but there was a gap, and so the Allied forces attacked that gap. So that's the kind of an idea for a little small table battle is so you've got this kind of fortified wall along for like 2/3 of the table and a little gap in the middle, and you've got to try and break through that gap. That's another example from one of the other battles in this period. It was like you could take a battle and divide it into thirds or fifths or whatever, or quarters, and then fight all 5 battles, and the winner is whoever gets best of 3 or whatever. And one of those examples, it was Allied forces had to march through some woods to attack a fortified position, and in the 1 hour Wargames rules it says you don't move through woods. They count as impassable, which is I quite like. It's an interesting thing. But you could have a little path through the woods, so you have your attackers have to go through these little paths through the woods. That's the only way out. And then at the end they come out and they've got this fortified wall to break through. I don't know if this is going to be. So these are just ways to make potentially interesting little battles. So I don't know if it's going to work, but that's basically the next plan for this Spanish session. Is look through the list make a list of the battles in the Low Countries and Austria, and then pick out ones which have an interesting aspect. Either the ones that can be split into 3 chunks and fought in three different separate battles, or just look for interesting chunks of battles and then string them together. So I don't know if that's interesting to anyone, but I think that's kind of as a general thing. I think that's one way of looking at this stuff. Is stringing little battles together in a sequence and doing a best of 3 or best of 5 or whatever. Anyway, I think that's that. Okie doke, toodle pip.